The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
And hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show, episode 81, available on podcast and on streaming internet radio. I'm your host, Charles Christian, and we've got our usual mixture of stories, some serious, some humorous, some a little bit in the middle, whatever. We thoroughly hope you'll enjoy the next hour, and please feel free to contact us with any of your views. Now, on with the show. And here's Janie, and we're talking about DNA, I think.
Yes, because listeners may remember, although I doubt it wasn't that interesting. But we had our DNA analysed. Mm-hmm. You know, one of those cheap kits that you give each other for Christmas, and yes. but scientifically sound. And I reported about my DNA. Mm-hmm. Charles, yours was rejected, I believe.
Yes, it
initially.
was. It was found to have no
human
to any known human species. I'd rather hoping it would be something rather more exciting, but no, I think it was just...
You didn't do it properly, did you?
Bit of toast in there.
Yes.
Half man, half toast.
That would be what it was. Yeah. Despite the very plain and simple instructions.
I'm a man.
But yeah.
I don't read the instructions.
The interesting thing, well, slightly annoying thing is because you're a man, you get to have your DNA of your mother line, obviously,
yes.
All the mothers going back, and your father line analysed, where as a female, they only can go back through the mother line.
Yes, you have to have your brother or your
absolutely. Yeah.
Other close male relative.
Yes.
For you to get your side.
Yeah. Well, no. Anyway, talking about you now, the results are in, and I can't make a lot of sense of them really, but I've just had a glance at them here, and I see the first one is Tuareg on your mother line.
Yes. Tuareg.
Now,
yes.
I don't know anything about Tuareg. I think they are some sort of, Arab, Muslim type.
They are the
population.
They are the population of the North Africa, Northern Sahara.
Gotcha. Yes, that's it. Yep.
I think it's the bit they used to call the Fazan back in the days of the French and the Spanish.
Oh, that's the place name, is it?
Yes.
Fazan.
Fazan, yes.
And the only other thing I know about them is that the men are the ones that wear the veils.
They are.
Which I think are normally blue.
They are, and they used to be known as the blue people because they were sold lots of garments in their blue, and it hadn't been fixed properly, so the dye ran, so a lot of them actually did end up blue from wearing them.
Anyway, yes, so Tuareg there, and then perhaps a little less exciting, DNA from whales.
Yes.
And obviously that's not the cute marine mammal we're talking about. Although you were born by the sea.
That's true.
So there was always a chance.
I was
part herring. But no, Wales as in UK. Mm-hmm. So I haven't seen you wearing any funny little
Welsh outfits.
Welsh hats and outfits. No. Galicia is another.
Which is northwest Spain.
Spain. And mainland.
The main
Spain.
part of Spain,
That's
yes.
quite a
Mixture.
bizarre mix on your mother line, isn't it?
It is.
Can you explain?
Well, my mother always liked to. She once went to a séance or something of that nature, and was told that she, in a past life, had been an Egyptian princess.
Sorry, not laughing. No.
And of course, that's broadly North Africa, Sahara Desert, possibly.
Yeah.
Wales, there is a family legend that great-great-great-grandmother came on a coach all the way from Wales to see the Duke of Wellington lying in state. Not realising lying in state means the person is dead in a coffin and you all march round it. And she apparently said, came all that way and there was just this wizened old little man lying dead in his bed. So
she should have read the small print.
She should have on the back of the ticket, yes.
Eventbrite ticket.
Yes. And so there is this sort of legend that part of the female line was of Welsh origin, supposedly possibly related to Elizabeth Fry, who was the prison reformer as opposed to, looking excited, the chocolate maker.
Oh, right.
But I think they may be the same family. Quakers they were. Could well have been.
Yeah.
And then
Nice.
the Spanish bit, not a clue.
No. But funnily enough, she did often strike me as looking a little bit Spanish. Mm-hmm. There was just something about her. Anyway, father line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't surprise me so much because I always thought he did look somewhat Scandinavian, Nordic-y looking.
It's pure Viking, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Not a look in from anybody else.
No, we've got Sweden, we've got Norway, Denmark and Finland. So absolutely Vikings, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm a blonde-haired bolt from the Baltic Ocean, the Gulf of Finland or whatever.
Yeah. Well, at least it's exotic.
It is.
Mine was South London. With a heady bit of Bedfordshire in there.
We always thought that when the Vikings came over to my hometown of Scarborough to do a bit of raping, looting and pillaging, my family thought, oh, this is nice here, and stayed on and opened a shop.
Yeah, selling little trinkets.
Little trinkets.
Kiss me quick hats.
Kiss me quick hats. Skulls of your enemy to drink at.
They were more peaceable Vikings.
Yeah, they were, yes.
General average.
Yes,
Yeah.
So it wasn't what I was expecting.
No. It's quite a shock, really.
Yes.
Interesting. But the other thing is, of course, these percentage of DNA, they go back scores and scores and scores and hundreds and thousands of years even. So it's not like, well, if we did a bit of rootling around, we'd find a great-grandfather who was a wonderful exotic Tuareg tribesman or anything.
No.
No. Again, probably they've been up north for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
North of England and, yeah.
The Welsh bit is probably more local, but
Yeah.
there we go.
There we go.
So,
Interesting.
yes,
You can
half
draw-
Viking, half Arab.
Trust you to extract the most interesting embroidered aspect of it. I'm not jealous.
Thank you, Jenny. So we're taking part in a pub quiz recently, and one of the questions, it was in the food and drink category, was what are collops? That's C-O-L-L-O-P-S. And I happen to know the answer, which prompted a lot of people to say, how come? Anyway, the answer is they are slices of meat or bacon. In Elizabethan times, Shrove Monday before Lent was also known as Collop Monday, when a meal of bacon topped with a fried egg would be eaten for breakfast. Well, if you were wealthy and could afford meat and eggs. But what's the connection, and how did I know about collops? Well, all goes back to my ghost hunting days when I was at Leeds University. And on one of our little forays, we went out to the grounds of Calverley Old Hall. It's a school now, I believe, and in an attempt to catch a glimpse of the ghost of Sir Walter. This is Sir Walter Calverley. So, what is the story? Calverley is a village a few miles to the west of Leeds in West Yorkshire, and was been the home of the Calverley family, the lords of the manor, for several centuries. Walter Calverley, always called Walter, even though he was merely Sir Walter, even though he was merely a Squire Calverley, was born in 1579 and, following the early death of his father, became the ward of his guardian, William Brooke, a.k.a. the Baron Cobham. Now, when Walter left Cambridge University, apparently without earning a degree, but having run up considerable debts, and it should be noted that throughout this period in history, the Calverley mail line had a propensity for running up enormous debts, he became engaged to the daughter of a neighbouring farmer up in Yorkshire. But didn't end happily, when shortly afterwards William Brooke, this is his guardian, encouraged him to break off the engagement and marry Philippa Brooke, one of Brooke's own relatives. For Walter, this proposal had two distinct advantages. First, he was marrying someone a few rungs higher up the social ladder than him, which in Elizabethan England was always a useful career move, and, perhaps more importantly, Philippa came with a large dowry, always handy if you have debts. According to one source, Walter didn't think twice about dropping the farmer's daughter in favour of a wealthy socialite. However, according to another source, he disliked his new wife and soon fell into a wayward lifestyle of drinking heavily and gambling badly, first in London and later back in Yorkshire, the family home, Calverley Old Hall. In fact, by 1600, after less than 12 months of married life, Walter had got through his money so fast that he was put in prison for debt, and his mother-in-law was attempting to reclaim Philippa's dowry. These financial hardships didn't stop Walter and Philippa from having three sons, William, Walter and Henry. Sons in the Calverley family were always called William, Walter or Henry, so it does get a little bit confusing. Anyway, by 1605, Walter Calverley was in debt again, and it cannot have helped that he was in the invidious position of having to sell off property to raise money to pay his debts, while his mother, who had retained her side of the family fortune, was buying up land across the country, including some of his old properties. So it's doubly galling. Then tragedy struck. Triggered, it is said, by Walter learning that one of his friends had been imprisoned for debts Walter himself incurred. It may have been the drink that drove him into a murderous rage. It may have been money worries that pushed him over the edge into a depressive, life is not worth living, so I may as well end it all and take my family with me mood. Or it may have been a mental breakdown. This also ran in the family, with his own father once being described as having a weakness of wit and brain and being a long time subject to lunacy. No, I don't know what that accent was meant to be. Anyway, whatever the exact cause, on the 23rd of April 1605, Walter Calverley lost his mind. He accused his wife of being unfaithful to him, claimed the children were fathered by a lover, and promptly stabbed to death the eldest sons, William and Walter. He then threw Walter's nurse down the stairs, that's young Walter, killing her in the process, and tried to murder Philippa by stabbing her. Luckily for Philippa, she was wearing a corset reinforced with metal stays that deflected the dagger blow. Nevertheless, she fainted, and her husband, believing her dead, ran out of the hall and rode off into the night, intent on killing his third son, Henry, who at that time was being wet nursed in a nearby village. Unfortunately for Walter, but fortunately for young Henry, Walter's horse stepped in a rabbit hole and fell on top of Walter, pinning him to the ground long enough that the local constabulary, alerted by servants back at the hall, were already on hot pursuit, and there they found him trapped beneath his horse. Then they arrested him. The capture and arrest seems to have jolted Walter back to his senses. However, he knew there could be no judicial forgiveness for his crime. In fact, it would be several hundred years more before any court in England would accept a plea of temporary insanity. More importantly, he also knew that regardless of whether he pleaded guilty or not guilty, when he was convicted, as he inevitably would be, the courts of the day would confiscate his property, with the result that Philippa and his remaining son Henry would be penniless and the hall lost to the family forever. Walter Calverley therefore took the only remaining option to him, and that was to refuse to enter any plea at all. He didn't say not guilty, he didn't say guilty, he just stayed quiet. But by denying the court had a right to try him, he was automatically guilty of contempt of court, which in those days was punishable by peine forte et dure, also known as pressing. This was a form of torture in which a stout door or planks of wood were laid across the victim, on top of which were piled more and more heavy stones until eventually the hapless victim either entered a plea, "I'm guilty, don't squash me any more," or was crushed to death. Despite attempts by friends and even his long-suffering wife to have his sentence mitigated, Walter Calverley was pressed to death at York Castle on the 5th of August 1605. He never entered a plea, and according to some reports, his last words were, "A pound more weight, lig on," which is Yorkshire dialect for, "A pound more weight, lay it on, lay it on." He was initially buried in York, but legend says his body was later exhumed and moved to the family plot at St Wilfrid's Church in Calverley to lay beside his murdered sons. But what happens next? Because he never entered a plea, Walter's estate and property were not confiscated by the state. His wife, Philippa Brooke Calverley, subsequently remarried, and in due course his surviving son Henry inherited Calverley Old Hall. However, in keeping with the family tradition, Henry was also plagued by bad debts, although in his case it was by supporting the wrong side during the English Civil War. Then came literary fame. Within 2 years of Walter Calverley's crime and execution, George Wilkins, probably best known to history as a London innkeeper and minor thug, published a play called The Miseries of an Enforced Marriage. It was originally a tragedy, but the Cobham family complained, so he rewrote the ending to make it a comedy. Yes, they had a queer taste in comedy in those days. The hero gets crushed to death after murdering his 2 children and a nurse. 1 year later, in 1608, saw the publication of another dramatisation called A Yorkshire Tragedy, not so new as lamentable and true. And for many years this was attributed to William Shakespeare. However, the playwright Thomas Middleton is now believed to be the true author. And then there's the ghost. According to witnesses, the ghost of Walter Calverley, brandishing a blood-stained dagger in one hand, has often been seen galloping on a large black horse with glaring red eyes. This is the horse that's got the glaring red eyes, through the lanes surrounding St Wilfrid's churchyard. Sometimes the ghost disappears at the point where the horse fell. At other times, with the ghost shouting, lig on, it rushes at any witnesses, but vanishes just as it reaches them. And finally, there's a story, first reported as long ago as the 1830s, of schoolboys who regularly tried to raise Calverley's ghost on evenings after class. Piling their hats and caps together in a pyramid, they would form a magic circle and hand in hand would dance around the churchyard singing, Old Calverley, I have thee by the ears. I'll cut thee into collops unless thee appears. And the ritual required them to mix pins and breadcrumbs together and scatter them in front of the church, before one of them would walk up to the church door and whistle through the keyhole to summon Walter's ghost. A newspaper report from 1874 says that on one occasion the ritual actually worked, causing the boys, not surprisingly, to run away in terror. Or when they returned the following morning, their hats and caps had vanished, presumably taken by the ghost of Walter Calverley. So there you have it. Collops, stabbings, murder, judicial torture, and a ghost. All you really want, isn't it? And now we've got a quick interview with Kit Lewis, who is the organiser of this year's Fear in the Fens Festival. Subtitle, All of Them Witches. It takes place on the 18th to 20th of October in Downham Market in Norfolk. That's Norfolk, UK. Kit will tell you about the show, about the programme. There's live performances, there's movies, and there's talks, including a Q&A by the legendary Maxine Sanders, one of the key players in the development of witchcraft and Wicca in the early 1970s. And it's my great pleasure to be talking to Kit Lewis, who is one of the organisers of this year's Fear in the Fens Festival, called All of Them Witches. Kit, I've got a copy of the poster here, and I can see the talks, and you've got movies. So tell us a little bit more about what the event is going to hold for us, because is this the second outing of the Fear in the Fens?
No, this is our fourth year.
It's a fourth year,
Fear in
right?
The Fens Festival, yeah.
Right. Okay.
And we've got a really fabulous programme this year. We've got the theme is All of Them Witches, and we're very, very pleased to have as one of our key speakers this year Maxine Sanders, who has been for many decades now, she's been a leading light as both a practitioner and an advocate of witchcraft and Alexandrian witchcraft as a way of life and as a living tradition. So she makes very few public appearances these days, and we're very pleased to come along to do a Q&A for us about that. We'll be wrapping Maxine Sanders' Q&A around the talk from Gary Parsons, British Witchcraft Documentaries of the 70s. So it's going to be looking at some of the sometimes lurid and exploitative documentaries that were made during the 1970s about the occult scene and witchcraft. Very pleased to be getting Gary coming and giving that talk. It's sold out 3 dates in London, so if you didn't get a chance to see it in London, this might be your last chance. And we'll also be showing a full-length documentary called Witchcraft 70, which actually does feature Maxine back in the day there.
Yes.
Other parts of the festival are going to include a talk about the history of the witch in film. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be matching that with a film called Night of the Eagle, also known as Burn Witch Burn. Mm-hmm. And that talk's going to be provided for us by one of the leading lights of the folk horror movement, Darren Charles.
Yeah.
And it is also going to Night of the Eagle stroke Burn Witch Burn wonderful film from 1962 featuring the late, great Peter Wingard.
Oh, right.
Most of us remember.
Yes.
Department S and many other wonderful things from the 70s.
Jason King, yes.
Jason King, of course, yes. And so really looking forward to seeing that on the big screen. And our final film on the day will be Blood on Satan's Claw, which we'll also be pairing with a talk from Gavin Badley, who is a Fear and the Fens stalwart, big favourite of ours. He's come back most years to give us a talk. And he'll be looking at how the other side of the history of the witchfinder, really, and looking at witch finding from the perspective of the late Middle Ages, when there was so many of the witch trials in East Anglia and other parts of the country. So that was going to be a really great talk to finish on. And that's finishing on the main day of the festival. And then we'll be closing with a screening of Blood on Satan's Claw.
Yeah.
Then on Sunday, the final day, we'll be closing the festival with a performance of Lovecraft After Dark from the Don't Go Into the Cellar theatre company.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 days of classic horror and some really great speakers.
Yeah. So on the Friday, which events have you got on the Friday then?
On Friday, we're going to be opening the festival with an open mic poetry night.
Yep.
Where we'll be having some readings of famous poems around witchcraft and supernatural. So we'll be featuring things like from Poe and Coleridge and some of the other greats there.
Yeah.
But also it's going to be an open mic night. So if you write poetry that's in the horror or occult vein, you're very welcome to get in contact with us. Let us know as you'd like to come along. So we'll book a slot in for you for your readings.
Yeah. For people wanting to get in touch, what's the best place to go to? The website, fearinthefens.com?
Yes, you can find us at fearinthefens.com or through Facebook at Culture Babylon. Culture
Babylon, right. So that's the Friday, and then the main talks are on the Saturday.
That's it.
Yeah, and that includes Maxine Sanders.
Yeah, we open on Friday with a open mic night and poetry readings. And on the Saturday, we have a full day from 10 till 10 of classic horror films, locally made short films, and some really fascinating talks and some great speakers. And then on Sunday, we close with the performance of Lovecraft After Dark from Don't Go Into the Theatre Company.
Right. That's excellent. What venue are you going to be at?
We're having 2 venues this year. We'll be in a space called Space Upstairs at the Priory Centre, Downham Market. But the main event with film screenings is held in Downham Market Town Hall.
Right.
All the details are on our website.
Right. Kit Lewis, thank you very much for that. I look forward to seeing you at Fear in the Fens Festival. And to give you the dates again, that's it's in Norfolk, Downham Market, Norfolk. And it's October the 18th, that's the Friday, through to Sunday the 20th. Right. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks a lot.
And as our footnote to that interview about the Fear in the Fens event, we have 2 wristbands, festival passes, worth £30 each. That's for the whole 3 days available. And all you have to do is to be the first in to come up with the answer to this little question. The actor who played Norman Taylor, the hero, in the 1962 movie Night of the Eagle, is far better known for the character he played in a late 60s, early 70s TV detective series. What was the name of that character? We don't want the actor's name, we want the name of that TV detective character. If you think you know the answers, go to our Facebook page, which you can find at Christian Uncut. You'll find that. Look for Charles Christian Writing and Radio, or go to a Christian Uncut, and the question will be up there, and you just have to put the answer in, and then we will mail you off 2 passes for the event. And just to remind you, it is in Norfolk, England, and we can't pay travel or accommodation. So what was that? The actor who played Norman Taylor is better known for playing who? What is the name of that character?
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
There's an internet meme you may have seen going around. It's particularly popular in the UK, where we're having problems with politicians who really aren't delivering the goods. And it says, in 1672, a mob of angry Dutchmen killed and ate their Prime Minister. Options, just saying. So, is it true that in 1672 the Dutch did actually kill and eat their Prime Minister? Well, in a way. The individual in question was called Johan de Witt, and he was the Grand Pensionary, which in effect was Prime Minister, and he'd been in power for getting on for 20 years, but things had been going bad. They'd been losing wars, the economy wasn't doing very well, and people were saying we need strong leadership. And there's this guy, the Prince of Orange, that's later became William III of England, King William III of England. We won't go into how he got there, but too confusing. Anyway, someone made an attempt on Johan de Witt's life, and he resigned as Prime Minister. Meanwhile, his brother Cornelius was arrested on a generally regarded as a trumped-up bogus charge of plotting to assassinate William. That's the political rival. And Cornelius was going to be exiled from Holland for his crimes. And on the 20th of August, Johan de Witt visited his brother, and they were going to leave and move, he was going to escort his brother and see him on his way to exile. Unfortunately, there was a large mob waiting outside, and when the brothers emerged from the prison, they were shot. Not sure whether they were killed, but they were shot, strung up on a local gibbet, stripped naked and mutilated. Bits of them were cut off, and according to some reports, parts of them were eaten by the enraged mob. One report says a man ate one of their eyeballs, and another one says their livers were cut out and grilled and eaten. Now, this does appear to be probably a bit of propaganda on behalf of the de Witt family to blacken their opponents, the murderers of Johan and Cornelius. On the other hand, it is true that when there were public executions in the 17th century and later, it was regarded, people did take souvenirs from executions. When King Charles I was beheaded, people dipped their handkerchiefs in it to soak up the blood, and there's certain reports of other people, bits of their body going missing as souvenirs. So probably they weren't actually eaten as in a cannibal feast. Some more enraged members of the mob may well have chewed on a bit of gristle or something as a symbolic gesture, but they didn't get the salt and pepper out. Who was responsible for it? Well, it's generally thought that William, the political opponent, who later became William III of England. It generally thought he may well have been behind it because the ringleaders of the mob were never prosecuted. In fact, nobody was prosecuted for it. And it's fairly clear that the mob seemed to be quite well organised and only intent on getting the DeWitts as opposed to running amok and smashing places up and looting, which often happens when you've got a mob. So there we go. Probably not true then that they killed and ate their Prime Minister. They did kill him, but he'd actually resigned, so they killed their ex-Prime Minister and generally mutilated his body. If it's any consolation, the Dutch regard it as one of the most shameful episodes in their history, and so they should. Earlier this summer, Janie and I took ourselves up to the North Norfolk town of Sheringham and then went for a hike along the coast to the small town of Weybourne. And thoroughly enjoyable walk it was too, even if we did eat too much unnecessary ice cream and chips on the way. Well, is there such a thing as unnecessary ice cream? Anyway, when I got back, I thought, there was a priory at Weybourne. I'll have a little look at the folklore, see what they say. Because where there's a priory, there's usually reports of ghostly monks and monks who've had nuns as mistresses and been walled up alive for their sins and so on and still haunt the premises. But no, instead I found 3 other little stories associated with Weybourne. One is there is a stretch of deep water known as Weybourne Hope on the coast there, and it is the only stretch of deep water between Richborough, which is in Kent, I would recall, and the Humber, and very deep water. And from the time of the Spanish Armada onwards, they were always concerns that large enemy warships might be able to pull in very close to the coast and invade. It was a serious concern in the time of the Spanish Armada in the 16th century, and even in World War I, troops were camped out there specifically to protect the coast from any invasion by German warships belonging to the Kaiser. There's a little rhyme here. He who would all England win should at Weybourne Hope begin. Makes sense. Anyway, that's one little story. The second little story is Weybourne itself is believed to take its name from, and this is Old English, so Saxon, Weybourne, which means felon's stream. And it is thought that back in the Saxon times, this was where criminals were executed by drowning. Their hands would be tied behind their knees and they'd be popped into a river or a tidal stream or a bog and left to drown in one of these drowning pits. And indeed, there is an area near Weybourne called the Quag, which is thought was possibly one of these medieval execution places. And then there's a third little story, and it's a field called No Man's Friend. And it's on the coast, and it faces north. Now, the thing about the North Norfolk coast is if you head directly north, there is nothing between you and the North Pole. So when north wind blows, it's very, very bleak. Now, the other reason why this field has a reputation for bad luck is it's very poor ground. It's very hard. It's full of large flints, so it's very, very difficult to till and to use for agriculture. And worse still, its boundary is the sea cliffs, and they are constantly crumbling. So if you bought one of those, a plot of land, if you bought the plot of land known as No Man's Friend, Even if you did manage to grow something and the north winds didn't blast your crops, when you came to sell the land, there would actually be less of it than you bought, so you would lose money on it. And so there you have it. No man's friend, a piece of land that brings bad luck to farmers. Weybourne hope, a piece of deep water that brings good luck to anyone wanting to invade the country. And finally, the drowning pits. Cheery place altogether. We haven't had any practical magic lately, so to make up for lost time, here are a collection of spells I've encountered recently I think you might find interesting. I was recently reading a book called The Witching Hour by Silver Ravenwolf. It's published by Llewellyn Publications, and it's got a number of interesting spells. Here's one to keep out ghosts. This is if you are suffering from nightmares, night terrors, or you've got children or members of the family who think they are seeing ghosts. Soak 2 nails in vinegar. Nails, best use iron nails or steel nails. Soak 2 nails in vinegar, or even better, 4 thieves vinegar. We've talked about 4 thieves vinegar before on this show. Pound 2 nails into the door, pound the nails into a door or window frame, one on the right and one on the left. So if the ghosts are seen in a particular room, put them at either side of the doorway. And to add to the ghost busting power, you might want to take a combination of thyme, hops, frankincense and larkspur and put it in a conjuring bag or mojo bag or griggery bag and place that under your pillow for double the power. We've still got several months to go before Samhain or Samhain or Halloween, depending on how you'd like to call the festival. But here's one for honouring your ancestors. You need lavender, myrrh, rosemary, frankincense, hyssop, lemon verbena, and eggshell. And the verse you would recite when you're using it is, "There is peace in the moment, there is peace in my person. There is peace in my heart, there is peace in my mind. There is peace in my spirit. I send light and blessings to those beyond the veil. All hail that which is sacred and filled with joy." Might also want to have a white candle to burn. So this is what you would do by way of honouring the dead. The lavender and myrrh call the dead, and the other herbs ensure the visit is sacred, removing any negativity. It can also be used for petitions to specific loved ones or simply to remember them in a ritual. Use the herbal blend on your ancestral altar or in a bowl, and then take the powder and sprinkle it on the grave or the gates of the graveyard where they are interred. And for a named person, if you're talking about a specific relative as opposed to just your family generally, you might want to add their favourite flowers to the blend. If you are carrying out ancestry, write the name 3 times of the person on a piece of paper. Draw the sigils for Mercury and Venus over the name. Sprinkle the powder. That's the lavender, myrrh, rosemary, frankincense, hyssop, etc. Sprinkle the powder on top, twist the paper, and carry it in your pocket when you visit the graveyard where they're buried, or archives or libraries where you are carrying out your research. If you are carrying out the work at home, then perhaps put a circle of the powder, the herbal mixture, around the candle you are burning, and burn that candle while you are doing the research. And if you have a picture of that person, place the candle on top of the photo. So there. If you're doing a bit of ancestral research, bit of genealogy, there's a little spell that just might help you. Here's another spell from Silver Raven Wolf's The Witching Hour, and this is for ridding your life of bad vibrations, evil, malignant presence, kind of depressing surroundings that strike us all at times to time. It's called Dem Bones Uncrossing. For this spell, you will need rose petals, carnation petals, clove, bay leaves, clover, myrrh, patchouli oil, lemon verbena, some ginger, some allspice, some orange peel, 3 drops of white rum, no specific brand mentioned, some chicken bones and a paper bag. Keep the chicken bones whole. Those from your dinner are fine. Just wash them so they aren't sticky and gooey. Set them in water for at least an hour, then allow them to dry. Mix the powder, crush the ingredients, then put them in the bag with the bones. That's all the carnations, petals and the like. Shake the bag and then intone the following verse 9 times. I dig to the root and cast evil aside. The cross I carried no longer abides. I throw out the pain, the evil and strife. Them bones, they be banished from all my life. Then, as you're shaking the bag and you've finished the chant for 9 times, open the bag and scatter the contents, including the bones and the bag itself, into the garbage. Or if you would like to be really melodramatic, and it's safe to do so, dispose them at a crossroads. Though, put the paper bag in your pocket and put it in a waste paper bin. We don't want throwing litter around. There you go. Dem bones uncrossing. We're coming to the end of the summer now, and it's a time when people start looking for employment or thinking of changing jobs and moving on. And here's a little job finding spell. Now, the ingredients you'll need are patchouli oil, some cinnamon, some galangal, no idea what that is, Google it, some ginger, some sassafras, some devil's shoestring, and a tool that you like that best represents the type of joy or job you desire. So, for example, if you are wanting to go for a job, say you're a guitarist and you want to get in with a new band, take a plectrum. If you've got a career, something to do with writing, well, a pen or a pencil. Carpenter, a tool or a set square. You get the general idea. There'll be something you can think of and say, yeah, that summarises what I'm doing. And you dress a piece of white cloth with the powder. So you grind up all the contents I've mentioned into the cloth, and then you wrap the powder and the cloth around the tool you have chosen. And while you're doing this, it's also recommended that you burn an orange-coloured candle. Apparently orange is for opportunity. Or you may want another colour that you feel vibrates well with your new job. So if you're after a job and you know the company's logo is green, then something green candle. Anyway, the words you say, where you've got your cloth with the powder embedded in it and it's wrapped around the tool that represents the job you're going for, and you say these words. Spirits of Mercury, Jupiter and Venus, I call forth your gifts of wealth, good fortune and prosperity. Swift and golden may the success of the sun and the silver speed of Mercury bless me this day with finding and procuring my dream job. May all my desires be met with new employment, or it may be promotion you're after, and may my career blossom into all that I want and need. My dream job comes easily to me. So mote it be. And good luck if you are in the job market. We had a spell earlier about aimed at helping you find a new job, but supposing you've got a job and you've got a boss who is a pain. Here's a little spell. It's called the Boss Fix, and the idea is to remove evil, or at least the evil influence of your boss from the workplace. What you need are some chili peppers, some orange peel, some sandalwood, some patchouli, some tobacco, some musk, and obviously the name of the individual who is causing you the problem. Ideally, if you can get one of his business cards, so it's got the company name and address on it and his name. If not, just general stationery from the company with its letterhead, and write the boss's name on it. Burn the name of your boss and the business card together and stir the ashes. Then mix the ashes with the powder, that's the chili peppers, etc. And then to give them power, you chant the following phrase, following verse. However, you've got to chant it 9 times for 3 days. So that is 27 altogether. You say it 9 times each 3 days. I'll tell you what to do next. I shine the light upon its face to show the world the cruel disgrace. Unkindness, hatred, mouth of rot, turn tail and run, the evil stops. From in to out, no place to rest, wheel of fortune turns to west. Where water flows and gone you go, leaving peace, I make it so. So, you do that, that empowers your powder, and then you sprinkle the powder where you know your boss is going to walk upon it. It may be on the carpet leading to his office, it may be by the sill of his car, in the car park, somewhere there. And hopefully that will make your boss either decide to leave and go somewhere else or change his behaviour. Incidentally, I should add, while you are chanting your verse, it's recommended you burn a red candle. I was looking through one of my books of days that commemorate folklore festivals and the like, and I found this rather curious one that takes place on the Saturday nearest to St Bartholomew's Day, which is the 24th of August, in the North Yorkshire, that's in the UK, village of West Witton. And the villagers make a larger-than-life effigy of a man, all stuffed with straw, has a couple of electric torches there for eyes, and it's known as Bartle. And I say on the Saturday evening of the village feast, Bartle is carried on the shoulders of 2 men and paraded through the village, stopping at houses and pubs, and being even held up to peer in at cottage windows. Wherever the procession goes, a third man calls out, "At Penhill Crags he tore his rags, at Hunter's Thorn he blew his horn, at Capelbank Stee he brake his knee, at Grisgill Beck he broke his neck, at Wadham's End he couldn't fend, at Grisgill End he met his end. Shout, lads, shout, hooray!" And everybody shouts hooray. And eventually they reach an area called Grassgill End, where Bartle is doused with paraffin and set fire and burned. Shades of the Wicker Man there. The parish church is dedicated to St Bartholomew. However, it's unlikely that this Bartle is actually meant to represent the saint. However, there is a local legend that Bartle was a swine thief, a pig thief, who was hunted down, and killed by outraged villagers. In the details in the rhyme, which list real local places on the moors above the village. There is even a suggestion that he may have been an exceptionally large person, or if you believe the folklore, he may have even been a giant back in the days when we still had giants wandering the land. So there you go. West Witton, a burn a straw man called Bartle. And we're almost out of time again. Before we go, there's one little final story. Along with Janie, we visited Margate in Kent earlier this week, and I noticed a mural. I'll tell you the significance, the relevance of it later, but let's go back in time. Do you remember when you were a kid? Probably only applies to people in the UK, but when you had a boiled egg and slices of bread or toast with it, what we used to call soldiers, probably still do call soldiers, once you'd eaten the contents of the egg, the tradition was you turned the shell over and then smashed it to pieces with your spoon. Now, we all did this, but I never quite knew the reason why. Someone at some point had said, oh yeah, you've got to smash your shell. And we did that. Well, apparently it is you smash the shell so that witches can't use the shell as a little flying boat or sailing boat. Otherwise, they'll climb into that little eggshell and sail away and do lots of harm and evil. Well, if they're very small witches, I suppose. I'm thankful to Sophie Herxheimer, who was preparing a large mural for buildings and frontages in Margate. And she's an artist, an illustrator, and she talks to people and does little cartoons, including their words and drawing to show what they were talking about. And say she did one showing a small child, Sarah and Maddie from Ramsgate, smashing an egg. And the accompanying text explains that it was so witches can't use these shells as boats. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll be back same time next week. Thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll hope you'll join us again next week. Until then, it's Charles Christian saying, stay well, stay weird. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.